Next time you find yourself waiting for an elevator, standing in line at a grocery store, or sitting at a red light, pay attention to what your hand does. Within 3 seconds, sometimes before you've even consciously realized you're waiting, your hand will slide into your pocket. Your fingers will find your phone. You will wake up the screen, swipe, and open an app.
You don't do this because you have an important email to read. You don't do it because there's an emergency. You do it because the alternative is suddenly terrifying. The alternative is a silent gap of empty time. The alternative is being alone with your own mind for 30 seconds. For the first time in human history, we have successfully built a world where you never have to experience an empty moment. If you are bored, you have a multi-trillion-dollar attention industry ready to flood your brain with instant, highly targeted stimulation. We treat boredom like a software bug, a design flaw in the human experience that we have finally, thankfully, patched.
But what if boredom wasn't a mistake? What if that quiet, agonizing itch of having nothing to do is actually the most dangerous evolutionary trigger we possess? And what if, by successfully erasing it from our lives, we are accidentally erasing the very thing that makes us human? To understand how deep this fear of empty space goes, we have to look at a famous experiment from 2014. Social psychologist Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia wanted to see how long modern humans could survive without external stimulation. He placed volunteers in a completely bare room. No phones, no books, no screens, no pens. Just a chair and their own thoughts. The instructions were simple. Sit quietly for 15 minutes. But Wilson added a twist. There was one object in the room with them, a small console with a button. Before the experiment started, the participants were given a sample of what the button did. It delivered a sharp, painful electric shock to their ankle. It was so unpleasant that every single participant said they would willingly pay money to avoid being shocked again. Then, the 15-minute clock started. The results shocked the scientific community. Deprived of any external input, 67% of the men and 25% of the women voluntarily chose to shock themselves rather than sit in silence with their own minds. One man shocked himself 190 times. They literally chose physical pain over 15 minutes of pure, uninterrupted boredom. This is the secret that the technology companies in Silicon Valley figured out a decade ago. Human beings do not merely dislike boredom. We are biologically terrified of it. We will actively damage ourselves to avoid it. But to understand why our brains react this way, we have to go back to the savannah, long before there were screens, notifications, or even books.
We tend to think of boredom as a modern luxury, but it is actually an ancient survival mechanism. Every emotion we have exists for a reason. Fear keeps us from walking off cliffs. Anger prepares us to fight off threats. Hunger forces us to look for calories. Boredom is no different. It is an evolutionary alarm system. If our ancestors had been perfectly content doing nothing, they would have stayed in their caves, stayed warm, and eventually starved or been bypassed by changing seasons. Boredom is the psychological whip that drives us forward. It is a state of painful restlessness designed to make us uncomfortable with the status quo. It is the brain's way of saying, your current environment is exhausted. There is nothing useful for you here. Go move, explore, invent, or change your circumstances. When you get bored, your brain does something fascinating on a neurological level. It activates a network of interconnected brain regions called the default mode network, or DMN. For decades, scientists assumed that when a person was doing nothing, their brain simply went quiet, idling like a car at a red light. But fMRI scans revealed the opposite.
When you stop focusing on the external world, The default mode network lights up like a Christmas tree. It actually consumes more energy than the regions of the brain used for active, focused work. While you are staring at a blank wall, your brain is busy performing massive, complex operations. It is connecting distant memories, simulating future scenarios, processing emotional trauma, and constructing your sense of identity. The DMN is the engine of human creativity. It is the workspace where the brain takes random, scattered pieces of information and collides them to create something entirely new. This is why your best ideas never happen when you are staring at a spreadsheet or actively trying to solve a problem. They happen when you are taking a shower, washing the dishes, or walking without headphones. They happen when you are bored enough to let the default mode network run its program. In the summer of 1665, the Great Plague of London struck. Cambridge University shut down, and a 22-year-old student named Isaac Newton was forced to retreat to his family's quiet, isolated farm in Lincolnshire. For nearly 2 years, Newton had absolutely nothing to do. No library, no professors, no social life, no distractions. It was a period of intense, deep, agonizing boredom. And during those quiet, empty months, Newton sat in his garden, watched an apple fall from a tree, and formulated the laws of motion, calculus, and universal gravitation. He later called this period the prime of his age for invention. He didn't build modern physics because he was hyperstimulated. He built it because he was forced to inhabit a silent world until his brain had no choice but to build something new to fill the void. But in our modern world, we have eliminated the garden. We have chopped down the apple tree. Whenever the itch of boredom begins to surface, the exact moment the default mode network is trying to boot up, we instantly smother it with a dose of cheap dopamine. We scroll through a feed, watch a short video, or play a game. We believe we are resting, but we aren't. We are keeping our brains in a state of continuous low-grade external focus. We are preventing the DMN from ever doing its job. We have replaced deep, generative boredom with a state of perpetual distraction. And the consequences of this shift are quiet, invisible, and devastating. When you never let your mind drift, you stop processing your own life. You don't resolve your emotions. You simply delay them. The unresolved anxiety, the unexamined grief, and the unasked questions about your career or your relationships don't go away. They just wait in the background, building up pressure, because you never give them the silent workspace they need to be sorted out. We have successfully cured boredom, but in doing so, we have also killed the state of consciousness that forced us to build tools, write poetry, and ask why we are here in the first place. We are trading our potential for comfort, swapping the painful birth of a new idea for the cheap satisfaction of an infinite scroll. There is a famous quote by the 17th century French philosopher Blaise Pascal. He wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Pascal wrote that nearly 400 years ago, long before the first smartphone was ever conceived. Even then, he recognized that the greatest challenge of being a human is learning to tolerate the silence. The ghost in your living room isn't a supernatural presence. It is you. It is the person you could become, the ideas you could have, and the life you could build, all trapped behind a screen of constant, noisy distraction. The next time you feel that familiar itch, the urge to reach into your pocket and pull out your phone during a quiet moment, try to stop. Resist the temptation to shock yourself with a digital distraction just to avoid the quiet. Sit with the discomfort. Let the emptiness stretch out. Your brain might fight you at first. It will crave the noise. But if you wait, if you let the silence settle, the ancient program inside your head
will start to run. The walls of your mind will begin to expand. And in the middle of that quiet, boring void, you might finally hear the sound of your own voice, waiting to tell you something you've been avoiding for years.